Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Zanukulo. Now, scientists on the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, have begun a 2-week meeting in the UK to finalise an update on global climate research. The review will cover scientific reports about extreme weather events and potential tipping points in the world's climate. 3 years ago, an IPCC report warned that heating of more than 1.5 degrees Celsius would risk dangerous consequences, something this week's IPCC meeting will hear about, and perhaps more worryingly, they'll confirm that the threshold may be breached within 12 years, much earlier than previously thought. Well, joining me for more on this is Arise International correspondent Faith Orr. Good to see you, Faith. So an opportunity for the great minds of science to get together and assess what's going on and put forward some solutions. How significant are these climate meetings and what they're going to be doing?
So more than 200 researchers are going to be meeting virtually to finalise this key climate study. Now, they're going to be working with representatives from 195 countries, and what they're going to do is produce a 40-page summary report that will form a basis for COP26, which of course is a climate summit which is going to be held in Glasgow in Scotland in November. Now, it will summarise how the Earth's climate is changing, what humans can expect for the next century, what has already changed. So over the next 2 weeks, the scientists and the government representatives will go through this study line by line, and they will agree it all. Now, the key thing here is that nothing will be included which isn't scientifically accurate. So even if a government representative doesn't agree, scientists here have the right to say, no, that's just not right, and it's not going in. And because of that, the report is very, very strong. So the last major report was produced in 2013, and experts say that the difference from then until now will be a wake up to governments around the world.
Well, that's a very important point, because we're seeing all these stories dominating the news. Devastating floods in India, Europe, China, heat waves in North America, and just over the weekend, mass flooding in London, underground stations inundated. Are these scientists able to pin down the connections even more accurately now? Will this meeting come up with a link between climate change and extreme weather events?
In short, yes. This meeting is taking place, as you said, as floods, wildfires, droughts rage across the world. All of that, of course, as the Arctic ice poles are melting, sea levels are rising. And all of this, scientific thinking has thought for a while that this is all connected to temperature rises, climate change, and we do expect to see that laid out explicitly in this report. Now, the IPCC has previously reported that human factors are the main driving force because of this. It's humans that are causing this, and it has been since the 1950s. So this new report will expand on that. There'll be a new chapter on weather and the link to these extreme climate events, fires, floods, that are potentially very damaging. So it's what they're calling low probability events that have a high impact. So we can expect to see a lot more information about the risks of these, as well as new information on sea level rise and the state of the Arctic and Antarctic.
And what about ordinary people connecting the dots between climate that they can see changing around them and the driver of this, which is emissions of greenhouse gases?
So they are connecting the dots. Even back in 2015, when we saw the Paris deal signed, there were protesters outside that building angry that the deal didn't go far enough. The deal, of course, to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And we know that the world is not on track to meet that target. Enough action simply hasn't been taken. But lately we are seeing, much more wildfires. For instance, places like California seeing fire after fire, homes are being destroyed. And it's not just in rural areas, but celebrities' homes in sought-after areas are being hit by this. So there is really no escaping it, and people are beginning to realise that it's affecting them. You know, much more coastal flooding too. Cities like Lagos very much under threat. So the climate crisis is already here. Higher temperatures are already dragging out droughts, you know, wiping out crops, causing more food insecurity. Hurricanes getting stronger, you know, glaciers melting that provide water for hundreds of millions of people. So people are realising that this isn't some abstract thing, that it is very real, it is affecting them, it is here, and that it is all linked.
So basically, much needs to change, and quickly, to keep in place this 1.5 degrees Celsius global temperature rise limit, which is above pre-industrial levels. Otherwise, we're in serious trouble. Is that about the sum of it?
So I think it's important to explain to viewers who might not be overly familiar with the science that when we talk about 1.5 degrees, we're talking about a global average. In some places, it has already been exceeded. But it's basically the tipping point where scientists say that things we're already seeing, floods, fires, will go from bad to downright terrifying. It is the tipping point for the natural world. Many parts of the natural world will change so much that we simply won't recognise our way of life. You know, there will be points of no return. Lasting changes. We'll see more places get dangerously hot. So if we take, for instance, Qatar, which is a Middle Eastern nation, it already sees extreme heat. At one point last week, it was 50 degrees. But this is where the difference comes in how countries will be able to deal with things. So it's very, very rich. It can afford outdoor air conditioning, which to many people is just mind-boggling, whereas poorer countries are going to struggle. You know, they couldn't dream of outdoor air conditioning, and scientists do say that we will see climate refugees in the future.
Well, that's pretty frightening. But of course, scientists can say all they want and produce all these papers and all these sort of, you know, attend meetings and so on. But I mean, the key really is for governments to listen, isn't it? I mean, that's the crucial joining of the dots that needs to happen. Otherwise, nothing changes, does it?
No, of course. And it is hoped that governments will listen in November, when, of course, all the leaders meet in Glasgow. Now, this paper that is being produced over the next 2 weeks will be required reading for everyone who is at that summit. It'll play an important role in guiding the decisions that are made there. The IPCC's last report brought about the Paris climate deal in 2015. It's hoped that this report will have an equally big impact. Now, the important thing with the IPCC is that it's not just a bunch of scientists producing a report. They work with government, they're commissioned by governments. In fact, they're owned by governments, and that makes the IPCC quite unique, and one would hope makes it also more likely to be listened to by governments.
That's an important point.
It is. It's quite distinct from other panels. But of course, we will just have to wait and see what happens after these leaders have met in November.
And beyond the government and all the rest of it, and obviously individuals who you know, have to play their role as well, what has the world got in its armoury right now that can help us in the meantime? Is the technology becoming more available quickly, prices coming down for things like solar panels, wind power, etc., which allow for the displacement of fossil fuels and for changes in industrial processes?
Yes, I mean, all of these things are true. Countries vary depending on how much they're utilising what's available. So some have very, very ambitious targets. I mean, if you take, for instance, Scotland, where this climate summit is going to be held, for 2020, the government set a target that all of its electricity throughout the whole country, 100% was going to be powered by renewable sources. They didn't quite make that target, but they weren't far off. 97.5% of Scotland's electricity was powered by renewables. Unsurprisingly, wind was the biggest driver there, and then followed by hydro. But the challenge is to spread this across the world. So Nigeria has huge potentials for renewable power, but of course very little used. I mean, if we used the solar capabilities or potential, it would boost jobs and widen electricity access. So lots of potential, but countries just need to act.
Faith, thanks very much indeed. Faith Orr, Arise International correspondent there. That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Bye-bye and thank you for watching.